Present. Ms. Ellis? Ms. Ellis is not present. Mr. Garvey? Mr. Garvey is not present. Mrs. Holloway? She's present. Mr. Mallory?
Here.
Mr. Mallory is present. Mr. Morris?
Here.
Mr. Morris is present. Mr. Orange Jones?
Present.
Mr. Orange Jones is present. Mr. Rock?
Yeah, present.
Mr. Rock is present. Ms. Noitier?
Here.
Ms. Noitier is present. You have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. What's our first, next item on the agenda, please?
Your consent agenda is ready for your approval.
All right, there's a motion, there's a second, any objections? It was Mr. Rock and Ms. Davis, Dr. Davis, seconded the item. Any discussion? Any objection? The motion passes. Next item, please.
Your first item is on page 18, item 3.1, consideration of the alternate framework for charter renewal of Louisiana Key Academy and the Max Charter School. The department recommendation is to approve.
May I get a motion, please? Mr. Morris moves, President Holloway seconds. Any presentation? Dr. Hughes.
Good afternoon. Just as you are, we came to you in June with a presentation just around the purpose of undergoing revisions and review of the previous alternative framework for both Louisiana Key and the Max Charter School. Since that time, we also had a conversation again, going back to have conversations with Louisiana Key and Max to get a better understanding of some of the intricacies that they discussed at our community meeting that they would like us to review. In response to that, we did work with our data team to make an adjustment to the framework that we originally provided to you all in June, which is around the student achievement component. Previously, on the previous alternate framework that we provided to you in June, the student achievement measure was specifically written in a way that had quantifiable measures that they must meet and work within. However, after our conversation with Key and then working with our data team, what we did was make sure to review the data to see where they would have fallen within that. After review, what we realized is even our statewide average didn't necessarily account for any points here. And so at that point, that would have been a measure that they would not have received points on, and we didn't want that to happen. So we made that measure more realistic and in response to real-time data. And so the presentation that you have, or the document you have now, for student achievement specifically has language around that they can either meet or exceed the state average to receive 20 points. They can also be within the state average for 10 points, and then more than 10 points below, it's no credit. This allows it to be a flexible measure based on the statewide average versus us creating that those guardrails now based on old data. And so that way it is actually able to make sure that both of those schools are able to receive points on that measure as previously calculated they did not.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Peterson. I will note that there is one public comment card from Ms. Heather Bourgeois, who supports the recommendation. She indicates on her card that she wishes to speak. I'll note that there does not appear to be any objection to this motion. So, yeah, that's what I was just saying. But I note that she would like to make a public comment and that she would like to support the recommendation. She wishes to speak, and I'd like to note that there does not appear to be any objection, Ms. Bourgeois, but you're most welcome to speak.
Greetings, my name is Heather Bourgeois and I am principal at Louisiana Key Academy. Our mission is to educate 1 in 5 children with dyslexia using evidence-based practices. Dyslexia is defined in Louisiana law as an unexpected difficulty in reading for an individual who has the intelligence to be a much better reader, but is commonly caused by a difficulty in phonological processing, which affects the ability of an individual to speak, read, and spell. Phonological processing means the appreciation of an individual's sounds of spoken and written language. We appreciate the discussions with the DOE about what it means to be dyslexic and how LKA uses the science of reading and the science of dyslexia to make decisions regarding teacher training, instruction, and assessment. LKA encourages enrollment in the 1st grade as the academic achievement gap is present in 1st grade. Those students that enroll in 1st grade can often transfer back to their home school after a few years. This opens seats for older students to enroll at LKA. Our school is committed to serving the 1 in 5 and will continue to accept children in grades 3 through 8 who cannot read or write, even though this will negatively affect their LEAP scores. We believe LKA gives these children their best hope for the future. LKA embraces accountability while recognizing that the LEAP assessment is a reading comprehension test that assumes fluency. This test is measuring our children's disability as they must work hard to read and are not fluent readers by nature of an alternate system in the brain that they use for reading. We accept the department's proposed alternative framework for charter renewal, but we strongly request that the department compare LKA student performance on the LEAP assessment to students that have a diagnosis of dyslexia on their IEP. This comparison would be a representation of students with moderate to severe dyslexia and a better assessment accountability at LKA. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Bourgeois. Any additional comments? Yes, ma'am.
No other comments?
There are no other comments. Please feel free to go right ahead.
Thank you, thank you. I have to say to Dr. Peterson, you make my heart happy. For 4 years, we've been talking about this alignment, and it's finally happened that she's come through for us. I'm going to speak on behalf of Max that I've worked with and still working with very closely. How they're so pleased, so happy with the department and your response to them and working with them. Thank you. And I can say that to Heather. Actually, we were smiling, Heather, because this Ashley said, oh, she's the girl that had the uniform on last night, but you were the student.
Yeah, we thought you were a student, and we were like, she's very mature.
And then now it's all clear now.
It's clear.
Real principles.
Right. And Heather, thank you. I mean, for your school to come together with Max, with this framework, aligned, couldn't ask for any more. So please thank your staff and everyone there for working and with the department. Max, thank you. Dr. Peterson, appreciate you.
And I would be remiss to not be able to say that Dr. Gibbola is the one that is carrying this work. So it is definitely her, I'm her mouthpiece.
Where is she? There you are. Absolutely, Dr. White. Amazing. You even taught me some things. Thank you. Appreciate it for your great work.
Great. Any additional comments, Ms. Bourgeois?
Yeah, just very quickly, I just want to stand in full support of this, but as an aside, when we do look at our accountability program, I think an area of study should be at some point when we look at students with disabilities who have reading type disabilities, dyslexia, whatever, that should be some part of our school accountability program, which takes that into consideration when we look at subgroup scores for those particular students. So if you talk about areas of study where I think we should take a really good look at, because when I'm looking at the rubric here, and I realize this is a rubric for renewal, not accountability, but this is reflective of the challenges that our children with dyslexia face and good work that people here do with them, and the same we should look at within our regular accountability system for those students and educators who work with similar students.
Great. Any additional comments? Seeing no additional comments, are there any objections? Seeing no objection, the motion passes. Next item, please.
The next item is on page 22, item 3.2, consideration of an update report regarding virtual school attendance plans submitted by Type 2 Louisiana Virtual Charter Schools. The department recommendation is to receive the student attendance plans submitted by Louisiana Virtual Charter Academy and University View Academy.
We have a motion to receive, please. Mr. Morris moves, Dr. Davis seconds. Thank you. Update, please. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion passes. Next item.
The next item is on page 39, item 4.1, consideration of the summary of public comments and agency response concerning public comments received in reference to the July 20th, 2021 Notice of intent regarding Bulletin 1566, Pupil Progression Policies and Procedures, Section 305 Submission Process. The department recommendation is to receive this regarding revisions to Bulletin 1566, authorize Bessie staff to submit the summary report to the Legislative Oversight Committees, and direct Bessie staff to proceed with the final adoption of the July 20th, 2021 NOI for Bulletin 1566 at the appropriate time.
May I have a motion, please? Motion by Mr. Rock, seconded by Mr. Morris. Any discussion? Any public comments? All right,
I
sorry.
do have a question just
Yes,
about
ma'am.
the process through which this is going to work that kind of came to my mind after I read the comment. And so my question is this: the proposed rule says that the local charter authorizer shall allow a locally authorized charter operator to submit a pupil progression plan in accordance with federal law, state law, and Bessie policy. But then B1 says, following the adoption of the pupil progression plan by the nonprofit charter school board of directors, the plan shall not require approval or adoption from the local charter authorizer. And so my question, I guess, is one about process. And so probably Dr. Peterson, you may be the best person to answer this for me. So right now, when we have pupil progression plans that are approved by districts, and so let's say the district doesn't have any charter schools in it with their own pupil progression plans. What happens is the superintendent of that district and the president of the school board signs off on the pupil progression program as being legal and submits it to DOE. And there's not really any oversight process once it gets to DOE because the school district has certified that it's in compliance with the law. And so my question is, what happens in the situation where you have a type 1 charter with its own pupil progression program, and it comes to the school board, and the school board says, we believe that you either have requirements that don't meet the standards for graduation, say, or you have additional requirements that go beyond the standards laid out in policy and in law. At that point, the proposed rulemaking, or the proposed policy that we have says, if that school's board of directors has already adopted that pupil progression plan, then there's nothing that the school district can do to alter that. So at that point is the only alternative left for the school district to fail to certify that it's in compliance. And if they do that, who is the final arbitrator of whether or not it's in compliance? Does that later come to DOE to determine who is correct, or do those two entities, the district and the type 1 charter, have to fight it out in court? Like, what's the answer to that?
Well, I'll provide some context there, and I think, I'm not sure if legal is in here to be able to provide that. I think that one of the things around this issue or concern is really about the authorizer and what's in their contract. So all of this really depends on what contractual obligations they put in their contract as it relates to what their charter has to do or abide by and that process by which. So yes, there is the policy here, but there is the world in which that charter could have, or the LEA may have something very different about that process inside their actual contract, and then that would be what they would have to do. I would say in this case of what this policy is doing is stating that they don't have to be approved by their LEA in order to make sure that they still have the autonomy over their school and their decision-making process.
So, but what happens in a situation where they're exercising that autonomy, but the school district believes that that autonomy is not in compliance with the law? What happens at that point if the school district, or the authorizer, has no ability or no say over that policy? So is the district at that point their last line of defense? Because you can't ask a school board president and the superintendent to sign off on a pupil progression program that they believe doesn't meet the statutory requirements. So they can just, I guess, refuse to submit a per pupil progression program, and then Does that mean that that school's students can't advance? Can they not graduate? I guess I'm trying to understand legally how this plays out when there is a dispute between the charter authorizer and the charter school. Does DOE then come in? Do we have policy that says that we come in and iron out those differences?
Yeah, I think it's a valid concern. It's legal here.
Sure.
I just don't understand how it can be a dispute if the LEA is not required to approve it.
I can hear you, Mr. Morris.
I'm trying to understand how there can be a dispute if the LEA is not required to approve it.
With this policy.
They're not required to approve it, but the policy right now is that local school boards have to sign off, and correct me if I'm wrong, either Superintendent Bromley or Superintendent Bochier, that when you have a pupil progression program, the school board president and the superintendent certifies that the pupil progression program is compliant with state, federal law, and VESI policy. Is that correct?
I believe that to be correct, yes.
So if a type 1 charter creates its own pupil progression program that is not in compliance with the law, what then does a district or a school board do? Do they just fail to certify that pupil progression program? And then what then happens? Do we have to have a long legal battle where we waste taxpayer dollars fighting, which is, no one wants that? Do we spell out in policy anywhere that then DOE comes in and is the arbitrator? Because what I don't want is the situation where we end up having districts or a charter school wasting money in a legal battle. If there's a way for us to have either the Department of Education come in and say, I'm sorry, your core requirements don't meet the university diploma, or you have added something on top of graduation requirements that you can't do. I guess I want to know who's going to arbitrate this for the district and the charter, given in light of this new policy that we are creating.
Mr. Castillo, can I comment?
Sure. I think Dr. Bromley also wanted to comment, but I'll allow you.
Well, I mean, I think that with the policy that was approved by the board, then there wouldn't be the need necessarily for the district to sign off on it, because it would be coming directly to the department. And so, we review those, and if there's any need for us to step in any particular way, if it doesn't meet the letter of the law, we can always send it back, because it wouldn't, what I just want to say is, if under the new policy, it doesn't have to go to the district. So it would come straight to DOE, and we would have to look to make sure, as we do with others, generally does it comply with the law.
Okay,
And so there would be really no difference there in my opinion, and really we should get legal involved in this particular question, but there would not be a difference there in how we would approach that versus how we would approach a traditional system if they submitted a PPP that wasn't in compliance with the law.
Okay, so right now then, so what we're saying is that for type 1 charters that are creating their own pupil progression programs, that there is now no need for them to approach the school board at all. They get to, or the superintendent, they bypass that step altogether, and their pupil progression programs will be independently verified by the Department of Education to be in compliance with state and federal law and VESI policy in a way that they are not, like, we don't do that right now. We allow the school district to certify that, right? And I'm assuming that when problems arise, then we scrutinize them. But so we're gonna allow them to skip that process, and then DOE is gonna look over all type 1 charters that are bypassing that process.
The policy that passed, either last meeting or meeting before, I can't recall, but it allows for that. It allows for the charter to submit directly to DOE. So we would, and we haven't had to do this yet, so this would be new. But we would approach that in the same way that we would approach a type 1's PPP in the same way that we would approach the system as a whole, where they operate in terms of their PPP. Does it comply with the law?
Okay, and so I guess my confusion about that is because that's not actually spelled out in the language that we adopted. I'm fine if that's what we're doing, but when I asked I asked Bessie officials about what the process looked like, I wasn't told that that was going to be the process, right? I was told that it was going to be submitted to the school board, and then so they would have their own policy along with the charter authorizer, and that those documents would then be passed on in tandem to DOE. But if it's going to be a separate process where they just skip over, I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that that's what's happening.
Right, President Howland?
I comment, but you House first. No, I just want to say I have the same interpretation as Superintendent Rumley, is that, any concerns about compliance with laws, the department is going to rule on that, and they're going to review if the board passes it, and the department will review the charter PPP the same way they would review the LEA's PPP and check for compliance. Same process, just going to the charter school directly. I think it's the same process to check for compliance with the law.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. President Howland?
Yeah, I'm gonna step out to say that I agree with Dr. Davis's opinions because of my experience, and I disagree with this policy, but so be it, let's move forward. Because I truly believe, and I see Ms. Matthews here today, don't want to put her on the spot, but she was our superintendent at the time as a type 1 charter, and the school district approved us as a type 1. So therefore, I was under her authority with her board, having my own board. And we developed our own policies, created our own school with her support or through collaboration. But I know one thing, because I knew she authorized us, she was the person we went to. She was the person that we handed our pupil progression plan to. However, we chose to follow LaBouche's plan because of what they had. It was good stuff that we agreed upon. But if we were to develop our own pupil progression plan, it was going to be forwarded to her for her review and having conversations, because ultimately we knew that the school board reviewed our school performance score, our financials, everything, that we answered to the school board because they authorized us as a type 1 charter. So that's the reason why I just disagreed with this policy, because as the LaBouche authorizing it, I'm going to bypass them when they have to oversee my academics. So that's my take on all this. I wanted you to know that.
Ms. Carol Jones, did you have a comment?
I got it clarified.
Okay, great. Right.
I do have another question, if you don't mind. Who reviews the pupil progression plans?
We do that in Mr. Bradford's office.
Okay. Any additional comments, questions? All right. Yeah. Seeing no additional comments or questions, any objections to the motion? All right. Seeing no objections, the motion passes. Next item, please.
That concludes your agenda.